All right. I just wanted to hop on here and give my take on the Aaron Rodgers situation and also Lamar Jackson, because these are two of the top quarterbacks in the National Football League. And I think that both scenarios are very interesting. Before we get into that, I'm going to tell you about the beginning of my sourdough journey with my wife. So stay tuned for that. This is Story Time with Chris. My wife and I have been talking about doing our own sourdough bread for a little while, and I watched a few YouTube videos just about the sourdough process and kind of how it works. I haven't paid a lot of attention because they have been on in the background while I work or do dishes or just kind of hang out. So I don't know a ton about sourdough at this point, but last weekend my sister-in-law actually gave a bunch of the siblings sourdough starter. So it was pretty cool. She offered to give us some and basically gave us a whole little summary of how sourdough works, and it was really a crash course, and it was a lot of good information, but I did not retain a lot of it, so I still need to do a lot of research on sourdough. And there's certain things that she talked about that I am still unsure what they mean, like discard. You can use discard with certain things like pizza dough, and I don't know. I'm trying to learn those differences. But along with giving us the sourdough starter, she sent over a few recipes for basic breads that she has done, and we gave it a shot last weekend, and we learned that our house is a little bit too cold for sourdough to rise properly. We had our sourdough attempting to rise for hours and hours, and eventually we had to try to let it rise in the fridge. Didn't rise very much at all. According to the recipe, it should have risen like 50 to 75% before we could bake it, and it rose not very much. So the bread, when we did bake it, was very, very dense, like really dense. It was good bread still, but it kind of lacked that sourdough, that classic, sour sourdough taste, if you know what I mean. So yeah, we're going to give it another shot this next weekend. I actually have a coworker who asked me about our sourdough experience, and she just started her own sourdough journey, so she's going to send over some recipes that she finds that she likes, and I'm hoping to find some as well. We're going to try this bread recipe again this weekend. We learned a couple of tricks, like apparently you can leave the dough to rise in the oven with the oven light on and the door slightly cracked. You can kind of mimic a hotter house, because we keep ours in the low 60s, like 61 to 63 degrees usually. So yeah, sourdough rises best between 70 and 74, I'm pretty sure. So kind of the beginning of our sourdough journey. I guess today we're going to be feeding the starter, and tomorrow morning we'll get up early and get to work on the actual bread process. So yeah, this is part one of the sourdough journey. Stay tuned for any future parts, and I'll link any recipes that I find to upcoming updates for this. But I know it's not a super exciting subject, but sourdough, I mean, it's cool. Like, my sister-in-law has the goal of not having to buy any bread or bread products that she can make with sourdough this year. So I think it's a pretty awesome goal. She has like four kids. So the fact that she can do that, and, with all those kids and stuff, means I should probably do it with 0 kids and my dog. So, and of course my wife is going to be helping as well. But yeah, that's part one of the sourdough journey. We are well on the way, and we'll keep you updated as things go. Or at least I will. I don't know if my wife will hop on the podcast. So on to NFL talk. two of the big stories heading into the free agency period that starts next week on Wednesday are Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson. First, I'm going to touch on Aaron Rodgers and kind of my whole thoughts on him, the ideal situation, and what I think is going to happen. So with, to kind of give some background into myself, I'm a 49ers fan. And so when it comes to Aaron Rodgers, I love Aaron Rodgers because he has never beaten the 49ers in the playoffs. So thanks for all those playoff wins, Aaron. Sorry that we didn't draft you. Well, sorry that the 49ers didn't draft you. I was not a part of that process. But yeah, so with that being said, I have a lot of respect for Aaron Rodgers. I think he is, off the field, I think he's a very interesting guy. I watch the Pat McAfee show all the time. And so one thing that he does on the Pat McAfee show is the Aaron Rodgers book club. And I've read one book from the book club so far because I'm not a huge reader and I'm trying to be. That book was Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And sorry, that's my dog in the background. Hi, bud. Can I take off your collar? Hey, buddy. Hi. How you doing, bud? Say hi to the people. Sorry, I got a little distracted by the dog there. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers is a very interesting person. And I have a few different thoughts. I mean, he is trying to take care of his mental health, and he's doing it in a very unique way that's, maybe not the most traditional way that, especially like macho football men usually handle it. But I think it's, he's his own person. He can make those decisions. He's an adult. If he wants to take ayahuasca, that's up to him. If he wants to go sit in a dark room for 4 days or whatever it is, then that's on him. I think it's important for him to, obviously with all these books that he's reading and all the certain things that he's doing, he's trying to find himself and get to know himself better, because a lot of football players, when it comes to football, that becomes their whole identity. And, they're just, that's the thing that defines them. And a lot of people don't want to be defined by just football or, just what they accomplished on a field. They want to go out and know themselves and be able to do it that way. So I give props to Aaron for, being outside the box and doing things the way that he wants to do them, regardless of what people think. So props to him. As far as when I think about him as a football player, I think at this point in his career, he is still a top quarterback. He's a guy that can lead. He's a guy that's going to be able to play at a high level still, especially if he's surrounded by the right weapons. And at this point, I personally, going back to the 49er fan part of me, if someone would tell me that today we could get Aaron Rodgers for a couple of picks, probably a quarterback, not Brock because he's injured, so probably Trey Lance, I would say that I don't want to do that trade. And I'll explain a little bit later why I think there's a team that is a perfect fit for Rodgers in the short term and why. Yeah, let's just get into that. So to me, the Packers have been trying to get rid of Rodgers for a little while. Well, I mean, they signed him to a massive contract a year or two ago. So obviously, if you're trying to get rid of a guy, you're not going to do that. But I think that he's, on his way out. So I don't know. The way the Packers have done, the way their GM has done things has been very interesting to me. And I'm glad that he's not the 49ers GM. I'd rather have John Lynch. Yeah, Gutekunst is, he, regardless of what kind of ego Rodgers has, regardless of what kind of teammate he is or any of that, they haven't given him any weapons. They went out and drafted Jordan Love to replace him. Was that 4 years ago at this point? So yeah, I just, it seems like they've been trying to get Rodgers to leave for a little while now, but he's too talented to just let walk. So that's why they, re-signed him, and why he's currently talking to the Jets. I'm afraid that at any moment while I'm recording this, that something's going to go down. But to me, I think that the move that makes the most sense for every single party involved, the Packers, Aaron Rodgers, and this third team, second team, I guess, is. And before I go into the team that I think is going to make this move, I want to say that I think Packers fans, at least, maybe not all Packers fans, but I actually met someone last year who was from Green Bay and was a huge Packers fan. And she was telling me that basically people in Green Bay don't like Aaron Rodgers, and they want him to leave. They basically wanted him to get out for a while because he, based on this person's reports, he's kind of a jerk around Green Bay. He's not very nice, and he's, according to them, he's kind of a prima donna, and he just cares about himself. So I think if that's the way that Green Bay locals and some fans think about him, then it's part of the reason why I personally have been turned off to him as a 49ers fan. Like, yeah, he's a great quarterback, but I don't know if he's a great locker room guy at this point. I don't know if he's going to, be the long-term answer. And at this point, I think that the 49ers have to stick to their guns about Trey Lance. They traded all this draft capital for him, and they got to give him a chance. And no, he has not received a fair chance. He sat here behind Jimmy G, and he got to play 2 games, and I think they went 1-1 in those 2 games. This year he started 2 games. He got injured against Seattle, and the first game was a monsoon against the Bears, so I don't think that was a fair assessment of how he plays the game. But they got to give him a chance. And I truly believe, I'll get into this later in the podcast, but I truly believe that they got to stick to their guns about Trey Lance, and whether he ends up being the next great quarterback or whether he ends up being kind of a dud, which is not a fault of Trey Lance. Like, I like Trey Lance a lot as a person, and it's not his fault that he hasn't been given the proper opportunities, or that he broke his leg in the second week of last season. So I think that he needs the opportunity to show what he can do, whether that's being bad or being amazing, and that the 49ers have to stick to their guns. And if they moved all the draft capital for a guy who didn't play his last year at his college, he played in a very handful of games in college where he looked great, sure, just doesn't have the biggest resume. He doesn't have the most games on his resume. If they took that chance on him, they have to own that. And if he ends up not being worth it, then I'm sorry, but they've got to get out. Like, that's on them. They made that decision. And yeah, anyway, maybe I'll get into that a little bit later, depending on how long this recording goes. But let's get back to Aaron Rodgers. I think the 2 most likely scenarios are that he retires or that he leaves to another team, that he gets traded. And I think for the Packers, I think the right move is trading Aaron Rodgers, because they have Jordan Love. And, it's a similar situation to Trey Lance, where he has not received an opportunity. I mean, he did play in a couple games last year, and he looked great. I thought he looked, maybe not Aaron Rodgers great, but that's why you got to have that experience so that you can see what he can do in the whole season. You can see, was this the right choice? Is this going to be a guy that we can build around and contend for Super Bowls with, or do we have to draft? Who knows what the Packers will do this year? But I do think the right move for them is letting Aaron Rodgers walk, get his money off the books so that you can go sign free agents, so that you can start. I don't think the Packers need to rebuild right now, but I do think they need to make some moves to get back to being a contender, especially in the NFC, where there's really 3 or 4 really good teams. The Eagles, the Niners. I mean, the Cowboys. The Cowboys are okay. I still haven't bought into the Cowboys or the Vikings. Those are 2 teams that I'm still not sure how good they actually are. So yeah, I think the right move for Aaron Rodgers is also moving to a new team or retiring. Last season was rough in Green Bay, but the Packers haven't given Aaron Rodgers any weapons. Sure, they drafted Christian and the other rookie, I forgot his name. They brought back an old, washed-up Randall Cobb. Sure. Besides that, they have, they had some good tight ends. Tunyon and Mercedes Lewis, but still, you need wide receivers, and they have great running backs. Sure, and Aaron Jones is a great receiving running back, but besides that, they haven't gone out and they traded Devontae Adams. That you thought they would have used their draft pick. They got Christian Watson, sure, but how many receivers did they pass up on in the draft in previous years before this last season, where they would have had a chance to grow and potentially learn from Devontae Adams a little bit. So yeah, the Packers haven't done the Aaron Rodgers any favors, and at this point, I think it's best for him to move on. The two most likely scenarios, in my opinion, as some fan that doesn't, I follow the Niners very closely, and then the rest of the NFL is kind of like, I don't really know much about the rest of the NFL. I don't know what's going on besides these big name guys. So yeah, the ideal scenario, the two scenarios that are the most likely, in my opinion, are that Aaron Rodgers retires or he gets traded to the New York Jets. Now, at this point, the Jets are the only team that have made an effort to go for Rodgers. They've met with him, and a lot of the rookies, Breece Hall, Sauce Gardner, and I forgot who the other one was, but they made a video trying to recruit Aaron Rodgers, and they burned the cheese head. So who knows if that's going to help at all? But I do think the right move for every single party, for Aaron, for New York, for the Packers, is for them to trade Aaron to the Jets. So the reason I think that New York is the best fit for Aaron Rodgers, well, there's a couple of reasons. We'll start from the top, from head coach Robert Saleh. He's at a point where the last 2 years haven't been great for him. Maybe he's feeling the hot seat a little bit. I think you got to give Robert Saleh a chance. And he made some, the Jets weren't bad last year. They weren't horrible last year. I think they've definitely improved under Robert Saleh, and they had some amazing rookies last year. I think all three of their rookies, Breece Hall, Elijah Moore, and Sauce Gardner were all rookie of the year candidates for defense and offense, respectively. So yeah, they've done a good job in drafting guys. Besides the quarterback. And to be honest, I think, Robert Saleh, maybe at this point he's a little bit desperate, and I think bringing Aaron Rodgers in is going to help him. It's going to keep him safe for at least a year or two. And so, I think for him, this is the ideal move. And, right below Saleh, they hired Nathaniel Hackett, who was Aaron Rodgers' coach in Green Bay. And so, there were talks last year that Aaron Rodgers could go to Denver, where Hackett was head coach, and I think that would have worked a little bit better, to be honest. I don't know how. I don't know. I think the Broncos gave up way too much for Russell Wilson. But I am glad that it all worked out for the Niners, because now Russell Wilson is gone from the division, and Geno Smith just signed 3 years for Seahawks. So things are looking good for the Niners. Nathaniel Hackett is familiar with Aaron. They're good friends, and I think they could work again together. So looking good for them. Now their quarterback situation has been interesting because Zach Wilson hasn't really panned out. So if they're going to be trading for Aaron Rodgers, I think Zach Wilson does have a lot of potential. Now, potential doesn't mean anything, right? Like if you're not willing to put in the work, or some guys just never reach their full potential, on the football field. So I think he still does have a lot of potential. I watched him when he was at BYU, and I grew up cheering for BYU. I'm from Utah, and that was my dad's team. And so, I think the Jets, if they do trade for Aaron Rodgers, they're going to have to give up a first round pick. I would probably send the Packers Mike White in that deal. That way they have a good backup for Jordan Love, who I think should be the starter for the Packers. You got to give him that chance. Same boat as Trey Lance. He needs that opportunity. Give it to him. You guys are the ones that drafted him in the first round. You've held on to him for 3 or 4 years, however long it's been. Give him the chance. And if he ends up not being worth it, then own it. These guys get, you're a GM, you get paid millions of dollars to make these decisions. So figure it out. I'm not a GM. I'm a what do they call us? A couch GM or armchair GM? I don't know what the official term is, but so I don't know exactly what the compensation would be if you trade for Aaron Rodgers. Definitely a first, and Mike White, like I said, and I don't know what else. I think that at least is a good starting point for them. I would be very hesitant to trade any of those standout rookies from last year, like Elijah Moore or Breece Hall. The only outlier between those three that I would consider trading is Sauce Gardner, because you want Aaron Rodgers to, you want to give him weapons. If you're going to bring that guy in, you got to surround him with guys that he can be successful with. I think that's definitely the right move for the Jets, and the right move for Aaron. To be honest, maybe a fresh start will be good for him, and getting the opportunity to be in a huge market like New York. I think it would be a situation where he feels like he's making a huge difference. And I got to check my phone again, because I think this is the most likely scenario. I mean, it makes the most sense. That's, New York is the only team that has met with Aaron Rodgers and that has had permission to meet with him. So now, one thing that is the deal breaker to me for the Jets is that you have to have a commitment from Aaron Rodgers to play for at least 2 full years, maybe 3. Because at this point in his career, he's still really good. But it seems like the last 2 or 3 off seasons, he's considered retirement. And, when a guy is at that point in his career, if I'm a GM, I'm definitely going to be a little bit hesitant to bring him onto the team, because while I don't want to, dog on Aaron Rodgers for doing his darkness retreat and going away in a dark hole for 4 days to consider his football future, the fact that he's even contemplating it makes me want to have a promise from him that he's going to be back the next 2 seasons at least, because I think those 2 seasons are going to be good for the Jets. The first season might be a little up and down with Aaron as the quarterback. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, the AFC has a lot of good teams and a lot of good quarterbacks. Aaron may not be as young as those guys. He may not be able to sling the ball around as much as them at this point in his career, but he can still be a very good, I think he's a top 8 quarterback at this point. He might be number 8, but he's still, in that top sort of tier of quarterbacks. Yeah, you get 2 years from Aaron Rodgers. You make him commit to that, and in those 2 years, I've heard that Aaron Rodgers isn't a great leader, but he can potentially teach a thing or two to Zach Wilson, and at that point, Zach Wilson might be ready to take over the team. I keep talking about how you need to give guys an opportunity to go out and play and show what they can do. And in certain circumstances, that is true. Like in Green Bay and San Francisco, they have 2 good teams that can potentially be Super Bowl contenders. And, that means they have good teammates around them. They have good locker room. They have good players. It's not like these teams that are constantly at the bottom of the barrel, the Texans, the Jets. You can't put any quarterback on a bad team and expect them to be great. The Zach Wilson is one of those exceptions where I think you've got to, he's had a rough couple of years. Let him take a little bit of a break. Let him learn a little bit. Let him sit behind one of the greatest quarterbacks of our generation. And I think that he can and will learn a lot if Aaron gets traded to New York. So, that's one thing about Zach Wilson is he's got to have that maturity to understand, like, yes, I was I was a 2nd overall pick. I started for 2 years roughly, and I did not play very well, but I can take this opportunity behind Aaron Rodgers and learn what he knows and potentially in a couple of years be ready to be that full-time starter. So I think that's the best scenario and the most likely scenario besides Aaron Rodgers retiring, which that would be rough for New York Jets fans for sure. But yeah, I would be very surprised if Rodgers is a Packer next year. I just think the writing is on the wall. I think it would be best for both teams to move on, honestly. For the long term and the short term, I think it's the best scenario. So besides that, hey, I just wanted to give a little kind of bonus scenario that I'm surprised isn't being talked about, or a team that could come out of the woodworks and make a splash, because they've been clearing a lot of cap space, but they've been changing a lot. And a team that would not surprise me to be in the Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson sweepstakes are the Tennessee Titans. I think Tennessee is a spot where a lot of guys actually would want to go. Nashville is a cool city. They have a young head coach who was a former player who, seems to be very popular. And I think that's a city to watch for. They're rebuilding a little bit. They're trying to get rid of pieces. They cut Taylor Lewan. They've cut a few guys, and they just released their center. Apparently they're trading. Now, imagine this. Derek Carr for Aaron Rodgers, and probably another one of Green Bay's running backs. But that's a scenario that I can see playing out too. Tennessee, the Jets are the only team that have received permission from Green Bay to talk to Aaron. I would be very surprised. If I were a Titans fan, I would be all for that. I think it'd be cool to have, all of a sudden you have Aaron Rodgers and you're going to be a place where guys want to sign with and go to, potentially for a deal, because they want to win Super Bowl. It's going to be the Tom Brady effect, where you sign a bunch of guys. Sure, it'll be like a 2 or 3 year deal maybe, and then your team will suck because you can't sign any guys, or you can't re-sign them. You're all out of money. So you got to be cautious with that. But getting Derrick Henry, to imagine Derrick Henry in Green Bay, that'd be pretty cool, to be honest. That's the scenario I want to throw out there. I don't know why the Titans aren't in the market for Derrick Henry to the Ravens. I don't. The Titans, I think, are going to make a pretty significant splash. I don't know. They might. That's the team to watch in free agency and in the draft and stuff. So that's just my thoughts. It's funny because I don't want this to happen, but I can actually see the Niners actually trading George Kittle to Tennessee. He lives down there. I think he would get along with the Rabel, and who knows what's going to go on. There's a lot happening, especially around the Niners, which maybe I'll go on and talk about that as things happen in free agency next week, as moves are made. Lamar Jackson, that makes me think of Lamar Jackson. I don't think it's a very likely scenario he ends up going to San Francisco, but I think it is very weird how all these teams have come out and said that they're not interested in Lamar, especially teams that are in need of a quarterback. Justin Fields is a good quarterback, but if you can go get Lamar Jackson and sign a bunch of free agents, all of a sudden the Bears are looking pretty good. You can trade Justin Fields to the Ravens, and that could be a good scenario for the Ravens because he's still on his rookie deal. He doesn't have to get paid for a couple of years, and they can avoid paying their quarterback for a few more years at least. So I do think it's odd. It does seem a little bit like collusion, and all of this is the people to blame for this are the Cleveland Browns because they gave Deshaun Watson that ridiculous deal despite all the things that he was being accused of. And I have decided that I will never ever respect the Browns as long as they have that ownership there and those people, because I don't know, they've had some interesting scenarios up there the last few years. So I would hate being a Browns fan for sure. I do believe that the teams to watch for in the Lamar situation are the Falcons. I think they could use Lamar, man. Like I just, why they aren't trying, why they don't have an interest in him, I'm not sure. He is a 10 times the upgrade from Marcus Mariota. We're talking about a guy who can run, who can throw, who can make basically any throw. I've seen some crazy throws from Lamar Jackson, and his durability is a little bit of a question, but I think that's a chance you've got to take. Guys are going to want to come play for Lamar. It's one of those factors where if you get a superstar quarterback, guys want to sign there. It's, the Tom Brady effect that we saw in Tampa Bay. It's, Matthew Stafford even had that effect a little bit in Los Angeles. So yeah, it's interesting to see what will happen over the next few days. Before I end my thoughts on Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers. Oh, here's something interesting. Sauce Gardner just tweeted a picture of Odell Beckham. Rodgers Odell teaming up, that would be quite the duo. I would be a little surprised if the Dolphins didn't try to make a move for Lamar because, I mean, Tua is a good quarterback and he was playing great for them, but man, 3 concussions in one season, that's a little bit scary. You know, if I'm Tua, I'm definitely asking, I don't know, that's a scary situation. And where do you guys think Lamar Jackson's going to go? Is he going to re-sign with Baltimore? If I'm Lamar Jackson, you know, I would love to be to represent myself if I'm an NFL player and negotiate my own deals with my mom. But I think at this point, if the Ravens are unwilling to do anything to, you know, sign him to a guaranteed contract like Deshaun Watson, where Lamar Jackson is, in my opinion, a better player than him. And even more importantly, he's a better person than Deshaun Watson. So I think Lamar's got to go and sign himself a good agent. You know, go get himself a guy that can negotiate this deal and get him a long-term contract, or walk him through the steps to get him to a place where he can get a contract that he's comfortable with without being completely screwed over by Baltimore. Because the Ravens must have learned from their massive Joe Flacco contract that they gave him a few years ago. Except Joe Flacco is not the same as Lamar Jackson, not at all. So yeah, I'm hoping Lamar goes to a team that wants him and will pay him. And I think Atlanta is a great fit. I think the Bears should be in play. I think the Dolphins, it's a little bit tricky because they have Tua. So I think the Dolphins just have to sign a strong number 2 quarterback that can be behind Tua, and, you know, a guy that can be potentially a starter for them. So yeah, besides that, I mean, the Texans could make a huge splash. And I don't know, I'm cheering for the Texans this year, though, with DeMeco Ryans at the helm. I have a lot of respect for him I had a lot of respect for him as a 49ers defensive coordinator, and now I hope he's a successful head coach, just like Robert Saleh, 2 guys who I really want to see succeed. With that being said, those are all my thoughts on Aaron Rodgers and Lamar Jackson. Let me know if you want to hear any more football takes. I'll probably talk about 49ers and their moves in free agency next week. Hopefully they make some good moves. Before we go, my 49ers wish list are number 1, CJ Gardner-Johnson from the Eagles. I think he would be awesome. I mean, he's just a great football player. He can play the safety. He can play the nickel position. He can play corner. So I think he would be a strong candidate. I like Jimmy Ward, but Jimmy Ward, I don't know, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way how he just kind of complained about playing nickelback last year. So I don't know if it's because he doesn't want to be paid as a nickelback because they get paid less than safeties, but I believe he was still being paid as a safety last year despite playing nickelback. So I don't know, just rubbed me the wrong way. And I like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So CJ, GJ. So he's the top of my personal wish list for the Niners in free agency. Number 2 is Taylor Heineke. I think he is a guy that can come in and be the backup for Trey Lance. And even though Brock Purdy had successful surgery, which we learned about this morning, I think the Niners just have to be prepared. I'm kind of sick of 49ers quarterbacks being injured all the time. You know, and since Kyle Shanahan has, you know, got here in 2017, I believe he hasn't had the same starting quarterback in back-to-back years, or, you know, something insane like that. Like, starting to look like the Browns with how many quarterbacks have been starting for the Niners. And I think they've got to find their guy. But with that being said, Taylor Heineke is not the guy. They got to stick with Trey Lance. He's the starter. Taylor Heineke is his backup. I think they have to let Brock Purdy get 100%, if not even more. You know, that's his throwing elbow. And you can't risk, I mean, if I'm Purdy, you can't risk your elbow because that's your whole career. You got to play it safe, in my opinion, if you're Brock Purdy, even if it means you're not the Niners starter going forward. I think you'll be given an opportunity. So if Purdy does come back healthy and, you know, Trey Lance and him are the 1 and 2, I think Heineke he's very humble, and I think he's a guy that is a good team player. You know, last year they had a quarterback situation in Washington. Who knows what Washington is doing. I don't think they're a very well-run organization, but Heineke is a guy that can be your backup quarterback. He can win you games if he has to be the starter. And I think he would be happy to play a third string role as well. A scout team quarterback. I guess that would go to the number 2, but that's the guy I would feel the most comfortable with, as a 49ers fan, because I don't think they should go get, I think other guys are just out of their price range, and Heineke might be the guy that best fits him, the system, or I think Mariota would be another good fit. But yeah, that's my number 2 on the wish list. My number 3 wish list item is a defensive end to line up opposite of Nick Bosa. I think he is a guy that you just got to give him someone else, either a defensive end or a defensive tackle, because the Niners are losing a bunch of their defensive line, and they were the best defense in the NFL last year. So, and if they're going to learn anything from the Eagles, is having that crazy strong front 4 and front 7 is going to pay dividends, and it could win you a Super Bowl. So, and then my other want is right tackle. I think Billy Turner is a guy that can fit that role well. I know he hasn't been the strongest last few years, but he's a guy that under the right coaching staff and system could be very successful. So Billy Turner, or another right tackle that can be better than McGlinchey. So yeah, those are all my thoughts on everything that I've talked about. Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, and the Niners free agent wants. So stay tuned for updates. I don't know how popular, I don't know how much I'm going to be talking about, football in the off season, but who knows? It could be something. I love football, and I'm very passionate about the Niners. So yeah, maybe I'll end up doing this some more. But with that being said, stay tuned. Based on my poll that I put up in the last 24 hours, you guys want to hear about the New York trip that my wife and I went on, and I believe we're planning on doing that episode together. So stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for sourdough updates, because we're going to be trying again tomorrow. Get that started tonight. Hopefully get some good bread for Saturday evening. So thank you. This has been Storytime with Chris.